Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Kent and Medway Growth Hub and Kent Victor Chamber of Commerce. I'm Martin Small. I'm a business advisor with both the Growth Hub and the Chamber. I'm part of the team that's been manning the business support helpline over the last year now, which has been a bit of a roller coaster. This is the latest in a series of events designed to inform all types of businesses in Kent that are closely affected with the new world that we now find ourselves in since we left the European Union. These events have all been hosted by the Growth Hub and facilitated by the Chamber of Commerce. So thanks to everyone in the Chamber events team for facilitating that and for their support. This event today is aimed at anyone who really has a need to employ people from the EU or things that have changed since we left the EU. We've got three specialists going to make presentations in their respective areas of expertise. We'll have a little opportunity for some Q&As at the end of each session, and then another opportunity at the end to ask more general questions. In order to facilitate any Q&As you have as the presentations are going forward, if you could use the chat facility, and we'll deal with that rather than sort of trying to interrupt or whatever. Just use the chat facility. We'll keep a note of all the questions, and then we'll deal with those at the end. First of all, as you've got on the screen there, some housekeeping tips. It's always nice to know that there's real people out there that we're talking to. So if you could keep your camera on, if possible, obviously keep your microphone muted. Again, use the chat function for questions. Don't forget, it is being recorded. So no sort of, I'm probably going to be the worst offender, no sort of flippant remarks or jokes, please. As far as that, so a quick introduction to our speakers today, and then I'll hand over to them. First up is Tessa Robinson. Tessa is an employment and business immigration specialist at Furley Page. She also gets to work on both sides of the fence, so she's advising employers as well as employees. She's followed by Roddy Barrow. Roddy's Group Managing Director at HR Go. He's got many years' experience in international employment, training and recruitment behind him. And finally, we'll have Colin Smith. Colin's a partner at Brachers and in specialising in all sorts of employment issues, anything from grievance and disciplinary measures through to large-scale redundancies. So I'm guessing that he's had to cancel any time off he's got planned for the foreseeable future, quite sadly. Anyhow, let me pass you over to get started. So first and foremost, pass over to Tessa. Then you can introduce yourselves individually and take it from there. And then I'll come back at the end to handle the Q&A. Tessa, over to you.
Morning, everybody. As they said, an employment and business immigration specialist. So kind of what I want to speak to you about today is the reality of immigration post-Brexit, because a lot of the queries we're still getting in are people hoping to find loopholes in the system and that there's information they haven't found out about yet. So in theory, the grey, and I'm here to kind of give an overview of the structure of the immigration system post-Brexit and the main visa routes that businesses can utilise moving forwards. So the reality is it's not as easy as pre-Brexit. Essentially, if you want to recruit people from outside of the UK, the immigration system now applies no longer that freedom of movement and work that we used to be able to enjoy to recruit individuals from the EU. I wasn't going to focus on it too much, but I wanted to kind of just very much touch on the settlement scheme because people can still apply under this scheme to live and work permanently in the UK. So if you do have employees already in the UK that arrived prior to 31st of December last year, do continue to encourage them to use the settlement scheme. They have until the end of June to apply for that. It's the easiest way to secure your current workforce. So kind of to start with the overview of the system, the first thing an employer has to have in order to be able to recruit from outside of the UK is a sponsor licence. It's required if you want to employ a non-UK national on a permanent basis. Having said that, there are two types of sponsor licence a company can enjoy and apply for. The first one's a worker licence, and the second one is what we call a temporary worker licence. The temporary worker licence is often a bit confusing for businesses because it doesn't cover people who you want to bring to the UK on, say, a fixed term contract. If there's a project that's running for a year, it doesn't cover that scenario. It applies more to things like the agricultural worker scheme, people coming for a specific job, sports people, there's loads of different types of visas. The majority of people will need the worker licence, sponsor licence, to employ people from outside of the UK. It's not cheap. The fee to obtain this varies anywhere from between £536 to £1,476. And that fee depends on the size of the organisation by number of employees, turnover and assets. The sponsor licence is basically the Home Office's way of saying, yep, you're a good employer, we know you uphold all the immigration rules, you do all your right to work checks, it's their stamp of approval for you to employ people under the immigration system. If you don't have a sponsor licence, you won't be able to bring people over, is the basic rule. Skilled worker visa. So this is what's very much spoken about in the press. It's the main type of visa that people will utilise if they want to employ people from outside of the UK. This replaced the Tier 2 general visa under the old system, and it's become a little bit more difficult to utilise post-Brexit than pre-Brexit. So it's the overriding kind of theme throughout what I'm saying. Everything's become a bit more stringent. Not all roles in the UK will be eligible for a skilled worker visa. So if you have a role that you think, okay, we want to employ somebody in this role, first thing you have to do is go and check whether it's on the list of eligible occupations that the Home Office and government have published. You can literally find this online, it changes all the time, and this will be your framework to check the role qualifies. When you go on there, it will give you a little code for the job, a little description, and it will give you the minimum salary that you have to pay the employee to employ them in the UK. There was a lot of talk about this when the immigration system got announced. As you can see on the side, the minimum salary for any of these roles is now £25,600 per annum, or the going rate. The going rate is essentially the market rate as decided by the government, and that's published against each role on the list of eligible occupations. The best way of describing this is it really does apply for those skilled worker visas. The difficulty is going to be that this doesn't really cater for the low-end roles that people relied on to fill. So people used to come over from many European countries and come and work in factories and on farms and different things like that. This visa won't generally assist in that type of situation. Having said that, there is also a shortage occupation list that's always worth checking. So this is quite short, and the government do update it all the time. To give you an idea of what's currently on there, I checked a couple of days ago, different scientists are currently on the list, mechanical and electrical engineers, vets, very specifically certain ballet dancers and choreographers who have trained at national ballet companies, and certain chefs that again have trained through proper culinary schools, so not just your pub chef coming over from a different country. If one of the roles is on the shortage occupation list, the government have essentially made it a little bit easier to come over. So the fees that applying for the visa are lower, and it's generally facilitated because we know we need those people in the UK. So everything's just made that a little bit simpler. New requirements: individuals who want to obtain one of these visas will have to demonstrate they have a good understanding of the English language as well. And I won't go into that because that's potentially a little bit political, that requirement, but they do need to understand, they've got to show they've got a good basic understanding of the language. In terms of duration, the skilled worker visa can last up to 5 years, and it is one of the routes that an individual can use to then permanently work and live in the UK. So that's interesting to know that if you bring somebody in, they can then become permanently resident here. They can apply for one of these visas up to 3 months before the job is due to start. Current timeframes actually for the visa being turned around aren't too bad. I think there was quite a lot of fear that actually the waiting time to be issued with the visa would go up dramatically post-Brexit. Whether this is going to increase again once all the COVID travel restrictions and everything have changed, wait to see. But at present, it's taking about 3 weeks to get the visa issued if you're applying from outside of the UK, and about 8 weeks if you're inside the UK. On the face of it, it looks a bit perverse, and you think it might be the other way around, easier to apply if you're already in the UK and switching jobs. But I think it's because if they were in a different country, you have to make arrangements to travel to the UK, so they do try to process those quite quickly. The fee for these type of visas, it varies again depending on the role and the individual. It's anywhere between £610 and £1,408. There's a token reduction of £55 on these fees, a huge reduction if you're from certain countries, and they're essentially the old EU countries. It was negotiated, I think. It really is a token reduction. It's not huge. One of the things individuals do have to pay is the health surcharge. So this is because there was concerns that there was a lot of health tourism going on. So people coming to the UK under this type of visa have to pay the £624 per year to use the health system. And the final thing they have to show when applying for this is that they have savings to sustain themselves throughout the first month in the UK, because of course they won't get paid generally until the end of the first month of their employment. So the government has said, well, okay, what do they do during that first month? And this is what they've come up with. And this is a good example of how pernickety and black and white the immigration rules really are. So the savings have to have been held for 28 days in a row within 31 days before the application date. And I've heard of horror stories in the past where people haven't checked the evidence they've sent in to the Home Office when they're applying, and they've sent 1 day short of the evidence required, so 27 days, or they've held it for 28 days, but not 28 days in a row within that time frame. You don't get a second chance at sending that evidence in. The application will automatically be rejected. That's how pernickety it is. They don't say, this evidence is missing, can you please provide it, and then we'll process. It's rejected and you have to repay the fees. That is how black and white it is. So when you put the application in, if you're assisting employees, just make sure you've gone through, you've got your checklist, and you make sure you do have the evidence they've requested. Things get thrown out on technicalities all the time. If an individual and you as an employer are feeling very generous, you can actually make a declaration that you will support that employee during their first month of employment. And if you do that, then the individual doesn't have to show that they've got those savings in the bank account for that period of time. But of course, it becomes your responsibility then to ensure you do support that individual if they get into difficulties. So it's a business decision as to whether you want the employee to be able to tick that box on the form or not. That's the type of visa you use if you want to employ somebody on a permanent basis, you're recruiting directly into the role. Some organisations obviously have offices across Europe and want to recruit from within the pool they already have in the wider business. And that's where this visa comes in. So it's the intra-company transfer visa, and they haven't really renamed this one at all. It used to be the Tier 2 intra-company transfer visa. Does what it says on the tin. There are two types, the general one and the graduate trainee visa. I'm not going to touch on the graduate trainee visa today because, again, it's a subcategory within a subcategory that won't apply to everybody. But if you do want information on it, just let us know after the seminar and I can give it to you. To bring somebody in from under this type of visa, they must have worked for your employer overseas for 12 months Otherwise, the minimum salary requirement shoots through the roof. You can see on the slide, it goes up to £73,900. So it really is saying, well, actually, no, we really want this talented person to come to the UK for the period of time. And I'll go on to that in a second. It's really quite difficult to do. You didn't used to have quite these high salary thresholds under the old system. Having said that, if you want to do it regardless, so even if they have been employed for more than 12 months, there's still a high minimum salary threshold. It's £41,500. So you can really see it's making that declaration that no, this person is really skilled. We need to bring them to the UK to bring benefit to the UK-based office and business. The individual can stay for the shorter period of either the time on the certificate of sponsorship plus 14 days. So a good example, you've got a project running in your UK office that you want the specific individual to run or be part of, but you only need them for 12 months. You know the project's only going to last for that period of time. So you, with your sponsor license, would issue your certificate of sponsorship, and the individual could stay for that 12 months plus 14 days. So it gives them time to arrive and leave in the UK pre and post that project. 5 years is kind of the maximum really under this, but that 5-year period can be split up. So for example, if you have offices all over Europe, they can stay in the UK for 5 years in any 6-year period if they're paid under the 73,900. So they could come to the UK office for 4 years, say they could go and work in Sweden then for another 6 months. They've still got another 1 year of that 5-year period that they could come back to the UK after that sabbatical. So it allows people to move a bit more freely around the European offices or worldwide offices, if that's the case. I won't touch on the 9 years in any 10-year period because that's a very specific situation, but there are situations if people are highly paid that they can stay longer under these type of visas. Again, the fee, the health charge and the savings requirements are all the same as under the skilled worker visa. The deduction, again, applies if they're coming from an EU country. Health surcharge still applies for the individual, and they still have to have the savings requirement, or you as an employer can make that tick to say, no, we'll support them for the first month. One thing I probably should say is both under the skilled worker visa and the intra-company transfer visa, the individual can bring their family over to the UK as well if they qualify. So generally they have to be in an enduring relationship, and the family and children have to be able to support themselves. But the financial requirement to show they have to support themselves is much, much lower than this £1,270. It's closer to a couple of £100 per person. Because the idea is the individual is earning a good salary, they can support their family. One of the other things that comes up time and time again, and the government website is quite misleading on this, is people are like, well, okay, we've got these offices around the world. People come over for short business visits all the time. How do we now facilitate that post-Brexit? The government website has this kind of broad statement that people can come to the UK for 6 months without needing a visa. True, that's kind of the very basic position. But if you're coming for repeat visits, you really, really do need to get a visitor visa. And the theory behind this, and it has actually happened in previous cases, is if you're pretending you're kind of a visitor and not doing anything business related, the Home Office get very suspicious about that. They don't like it. They like full transparency for business immigration. So they're saying if you come to the UK on regular visits for business reasons, obtain, again, slightly misleadingly, what we call a visitor visa. There are short and long-term options. So if somebody had to come for short visits for a specific project, you would get the short-term 6-month visa, but you can get options that last 2, 5 and 10 years if you know this is going to be an ongoing thing. So for example, if the chairman works in Germany and comes over on bi-monthly visits just to say hello to people and oversee the business, this might be the option. It is designed for short-term visits. So the idea is each visit should be no more than 6 months in duration. And there are very limited activities that can take place. The best way of describing them are they're kind of knowledge sharing activities. So it's sitting in meetings, maybe just signing off the odd deal, but they can't receive any remuneration, or the UK company can't receive any direct financial benefit from what this individual does. If that's the case, they would need to come under one of the other types of visas. So all what you can and can't do are listed on the government website, and it's things like giving a webinar, knowledge sharing, potentially training employees on a certain area of expertise. So nothing that gives like a direct financial benefit from a client to that UK company. As I said, they can't receive any payment directly from that UK company for this work. Everything has to be funded by their non-UK employer, and that includes their accommodation and travel. The only thing that can be paid by the UK company are day-to-day expenses. So say they hop in a taxi, they can pop in an expense for that. Anything beyond that is not allowed under this visa. You have to try and employ them on a permanent basis or an intra-company visa. They're not very expensive, so it can be beneficial if it is that type of general activity that takes place rather than direct employment work. To give you an idea, the 6-month short-term visa is only £95. And it's £95 well worth paying if you know somebody is going to come over repeatedly during that period, rather than get barred at the airport from entering. The 2, 5 and 10-year options are in the hundreds of pounds. They're not greatly expensive. That's kind of a whistle-stop tour through the structure, because there are loads and loads of different types of visas now. Health and social care I've completely taken out of this because they've got very specific visas, and obviously will only apply to people in certain businesses. And I find this works best if actually people have specific questions. So if I kind of hand over, and if anyone's got any questions, we'll go from there.
Lovely, thank you, Tessa. There was quite a lot that came up there. That was a surprise. We've got one question so far, but please do fire away. And this particular one, if you've got this lady has got staff coming over from their Milan office. Does the Milan office have to book and pay for all their travel, including the business visa?
Yes, generally. Everything has to come from the employing entity.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I was one that I thought of there, where you mentioned about sort of taxi fares being able to be covered. What about food and subsistence while they're here? Are they able to? Is the UK company able to pay for that, or is it?
No, again, it's generally the same. So anything beyond a very small out-of-pocket expense should all be covered by the employing entity. It really does ensure that kind of separation between actually, no, you're coming to the UK for direct work versus a little visit. And generally, if I was going somewhere, it would be my employer that pays for it. And that's the theory behind it. It's your employer that should fund everything. Okay,
thank you for that. And another one, what is the Frontier Worker Scheme?
Oh, that's very specific. I haven't got all the information, but I do actually have a sheet I can send out afterwards on that, if that's helpful.
Okay.
It might be one worth doing afterwards, because it doesn't apply to everybody and is very specific. And it probably will close in the future. That's one thing I'll say. So I'll pop something together and I can send that out to people afterwards.
Okay. I guess what a little question for Neil, actually. What's the we're recording this, and that's and the slides, is that all being distributed to attendees at the end? Or
yes, it can be, Martin. We can do that, yes.
Okay. And I guess we've got contact details, I think, on all the speakers, haven't they? So either contact the speaker direct, or if you'd like some support, obviously there is the Growth Hub business support line. It's 03333. This will all be given at the end. 03333 602 300. If you've got any other questions that come up that you'd like us to direct to any of the speakers, please feel free to contact the helpline. One little question for me that came up through it. These sponsor licenses and the various visas and so on, are these one-off fees, or are they annual renewal basis?
One-off fees. So every time you want to renew or extend, that's when a new fee would be. So if you apply for the visa for that length of time, it's a one-off fee. But then once the end of that 5-year period came and you hadn't applied to stay in the UK, you'd have to reapply for a further skilled worker visa and pay a new fee.
So they can be extended as a mechanism to extend them if you
in
need
theory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, everything's in theory.
Yeah, and the other one on those the health charge the individual has to pay. What about if they've got I guess it's the EHIC card. If they've got they presumably, as you say, this is designed as to sort of prevent health tourism, really, and even if they've got the EHIC card for emergency use, they still need to have pay the health charge.
They do, yeah. If you want to come under one of these visas, you have to pay the health charge. It's one of the requirements now. No getting around it. And I think that's the thing with the immigration system. It is so black and white. There are no grey areas, even if logically someone can cover their costs elsewhere because they have insurance or whatever. You still have to pay the health charge. It is black and white. They're the rules. You have to meet them. If you don't meet them, you don't get the visa.
Okay. What about the sort of unskilled labour now? For instance, the seasonal staff or seasonal people coming in, fruit picking, that sort of thing. What happens in that circumstance?
This is kind of the area that hasn't really been addressed by the immigration system, and it's going to be much more difficult moving forwards. There was this agricultural workers scheme, which has been piloted and seems to be working quite well. And the employer would still have to have the sponsor license, and that falls within the temporary worker license. And there is an agricultural section within that. It doesn't really cover things like the low paid coming into work in the factories, say over Christmas when there's a surge in demand and you used to be able to fill the workforce. The immigration system and the government has been very open about this. It does apply to the higher paid roles, the more skilled roles in general, but they have kind of said they will look at it if there is a massive omission and demand for a certain area. They will look at introducing something like the agricultural worker scheme long term to assist. But it's kind of a wait and see. At present, there isn't really a huge amount that allows to recruit, unless Roddy had some good ideas on the recruitment side as to how to assist with that.
Okay. All right. We've exhausted the questions for the time being. So thank you very much, Tessa. We'll now stop sharing that screen and move on to Roddy. You can introduce yourself and over to you. Thanks very much, Tessa.
Hopefully you can now all see my screen. Yep, good. Martin, thank you for your introduction. I just need to find my slides on my screen and then we'll be there. For those of you that don't know HR Go, we're a 115 million turnover business. COVID has actually been quite kind to us, that we've grown 34% in the last year. So we've done quite a lot of essential service work to achieve that. We are a national business. We have 34 offices across the country, and interestingly, we do employ 60 people in Wrocław in Poland, the sort of third city of Poland, and we also have 2 people in Sydney, Australia, with a bunch of offices across the country, particularly in East Kent. It does not seem very long ago that we were all very concerned about Brexit and the fact that, from our point of view, there was nothing else in the news other than Brexit, and eventually we saw the back of Theresa May, and then Boris arrived. And so it was perhaps with some relief eventually that on the 23rd of January 2020 that the withdrawal agreement bill was ratified, and then eventually it saw us leaving on the 31st of January. However, what a difference a year makes, really, from our point of view. And I want to talk to you today a little bit about perhaps some of the more practical issues in terms of that COVID and Brexit, and the combination of both has brought to our workplace. I suppose in the last year, the phrase unprecedented times has very much become a common phrase. And who would have ever thought that the issues of Brexit would have been totally consumed by something else, as they have been in the last 12 months. We are now also aware that the coronavirus pandemic has reached almost every country in the world. Its spread has left national economies and businesses counting the costs as governments struggle with the new lockdown measures to tackle the spread of the virus. Despite the development of new vaccines, many are still wondering what recovery looks like. And I suppose in most regions and sectors most affected by the economic impact of COVID-19 are gladly not the same as the regions and sectors likely to be most exposed to Brexit, though there are some exceptions, but that both crises combined will have a broader impact on the UK than either would have done in isolation. And I suppose in terms of turning to a recent report by the TUC, they indicated particularly the manufacture of automotive, transport equipment, chemicals and chemical products and textiles, and services such as finance and communications are apparently the most exposed sectors to Brexit. Whilst hospitality, tourism, transport, arts and entertainment are clearly much more exposed sectors to that of the impact of COVID. And therefore it's where those interact that we see a definite impact in terms of an automotive might be one of those sectors which are currently affected by both. But all sectors will have their own challenge, and I'm sure for each of you, you will have your own challenges and hopefully can take a few things from my chat today. If we look on a worldwide basis, we see a very changed view in terms of the stock markets, from Japan being up 22% since back in the beginning of 2020, to the FTSE where in London where values have actually reduced by 11%. So a very different situation. And I think that also implies to us in our own country that the impact of Brexit is likely to increase regional disparities. London, the North East, Wales, the South East and the West Midlands are clearly much more exposed to Brexit risks, whereas tourism-dependent coastal communities and hospitality-dependent cities such as Manchester, Liverpool, Glasgow and large parts of London are likely to be most exposed to the short-term impact of COVID. The Northwest, London, Southeast and the West Midlands may of course experience the double whammy effect of both of them. So if I turn to the next slide, we look at the employment side of things by country in terms of, from top of the list, Brazil, which always had a problem in terms of unemployment at 11.9%, rising to near on 13% of their country, relative to Japan at the bottom, 2.4 going to 3.3. I think it's quite pleasing to see from a UK point of view the fact that we have limited that increase to 5.4%. But then we all know that the furlough scheme, which I think I'm a great advocate of, and I noticed on my BBC headlines this morning that the Chancellor is intending to extend that further now to September, has obviously played a big role in that. And I think I would turn to the fact of running HR Go myself, that back in March, we were very concerned when COVID initially hit, that our temp numbers, which perhaps at that time of year normally were around the sort of 3,500 mark, suddenly dropped to 1,900. And from that point of view, the forecast I was faced with was very much with a hemorrhaging of cash and a business that would be in trouble in short term if something wasn't done about it. And the benefit to us at HR Go was the furlough scheme definitely bought us time to make considered decisions rather than running into something that was perhaps at rash that we regretted later. And I suppose the best barometer that I've got from our point of view is having a look at job vacancies and how they reacted since COVID was announced. And I think, as you've already seen, HR Go does have a couple of people working in Australia, and really it's not surprising that they've seen little or no difference to their barometer effect here. I think when I checked with my colleague in Sydney last week, who was basking in summer, Australia currently had 42 active cases, which compares to perhaps the 14,808 cases that we've got in hospital at the moment. And they had only had 5 new cases in the last 24 hours, of which 11 were locally acquired and 2 were acquired overseas. And that compares to perhaps our stats of nearer 7,400. And overall, Australia has only suffered 28,900 cases compared to what the UK has suffered of something over 4 million. A huge contrast. And then most importantly, from a deaths point of view, sad as it is, we have had over 122,000 deaths now, and Australia has only had 909. So a good comparison why perhaps life in Australia is much more normal. And you see already on the TV some of their sporting events, as with New Zealand, starting to get back to normality. But gosh, they do react when they get 1 or 2 cases, but that from that point of view, they have managed to maintain this low incident case. So I suppose who will prosper? And I think for you, you do need to think, how do you address these challenges and benefit from the opportunities, these age-defining circumstances? How do you ensure strategic progress whilst still fighting against the current emergencies? And how will markets, companies and workplaces change as we absorb the new influences of Brexit and COVID-19? And I think ultimately people do create value in a business. And a recent quote from the REC, according to businesses, the quality of their staff and recruitment is the second most important driver of their success. And I think we can all attest to that how offices can become very good with the input of some great talent. So what of COVID? So when COVID hit, working from home was all the rage, but it is interesting how time has gone on, but the voices for a return to the office have very much changed in terms of, from my own research and surveys within the business, there are probably even 3 camps now. The guys that really do enjoy working from home and have adopted it and really don't want to come back to the office. The people who miss the banter of the office, they miss the sales chat and really want to be in the office. And then you've got people in between who probably the hybrid model is what they would prefer, in terms of perhaps working midweek in the office and then working from home Monday to Friday. And I think this will give challenges in itself in terms of how do you legislate, produce job contracts for people that allows that flexibility, but perhaps allows you as a business that when you do want people to collaborate, how you get them back into the office on a certain day and how that works day to day, week to week, month to month. I think from our point of view, the hybrid model is probably here to stay, but there are going to be quite a lot of things in between. And I think it's interesting, some stats in terms of what working from home has meant. 56% perhaps feel happier now with some working from home. Not a huge percentage. I expect that to be larger than that. And it's noteworthy that during the pandemic, that a third of all adults have actually worked from home all the time. So again, quite a change from back in February 2020. And of course, you know, ultimately there are people who haven't worked from home at all. I'm not sure that you would see very many scaffolders working around the kitchen table. So we've adapted our lives, but nevertheless, 65% would say that they miss the socializing now. 55% now use their lunch break to use for their personal life. They take a proper break. They perhaps go and have lunch with other family members. So that's a very good, beneficial thing. Interestingly, when talking about longer working hours, I think the argument has been the company does benefit because there are less traveling time and therefore more productivity. And certainly that is the case. And there's a little quote there on my screen in terms of productivity is up by 2.4%. But when asked, are people working longer hours, only 30% responded that they really were working longer hours. But I think equally, over 50%, 53% felt that they had to be more available to their bosses and be available to take calls perhaps out of hours that they hadn't been previously, that there was much more that when they went home, then that was their time. And then, of course, I think most importantly, the mental health. It's really interesting how that has become an issue over the last 11 months. Initially, with the changes of working from home, it was less apparent, but how, I suppose, by May, June, the issues of mental health and isolation did become very apparent. And I think that is something for us all to think about for the future, because if people are working from home, maybe they are the ones where it works because they've got other family, they don't feel isolated. But again, it's something that is common in all businesses now in terms of trying to have a facility, trying to manage and train people in terms of helping them with their mental health. And then I suppose from our point of view, I actually am talking to you today the other side of Guildford in Surrey, which is where my home is. And slightly bizarrely, for the last 6.5 years, I've been commuting the 90 miles to Ashford on a daily basis. And therefore, from my point of view, I've been doing about 1,000 miles a week in my car. But I suppose one of the things now that it gets removed with working from home is those geographic constraints. It does give you the option to hire people from further afield, or even if they occasionally commute, then having an hour's commute isn't that bad, because 3 days of the week they may be working from home like the rest of the office. And I think what is also interesting is the cross-functionality of teams in terms of what working from home has meant. Certainly our finance department, all the credit controllers sit together. But I think one of the impacts of COVID and working from home is that they tend to talk to the people that they need to talk to. And so for where they're managing one of our companies, the cross-functionality of looking after that company will be more important than talking to perhaps other credit controllers. Of course, that team chat is still important, but we've certainly seen that cross-functionality increase. And I think equally, diversity and inclusion. It has been well proven that teams which are more diverse and inclusive make more for accurate decisions. And I think COVID has allowed staff who do work from home to become one of the team again, rather than the person who has to dial in. Now we are all just headshots in a Zoom call. But this will be something we all have to contend with, depending on the models we adopt going forward, that equally people working in the office could become the exception. And I think equally, management and performance and improvement in technologies is something that is key here. Working from home brings its own challenges, whether a lack of supervision, a lack of access to information, socialization, as I've already talked about, or even distractions at home. But hopefully we have all adapted with some more structured daily check-ins, more ways of communicating. Email is often not sufficient, but need a new set of rules of engagement to provide opportunity for remote social interaction, virtual parties. I don't know what you all did for your Christmas party this year, but also to offer encouragement and emotional support. And I think from that point of view, are we looking after our managers in terms of training them to look after our own staff? We are in this unprecedented age, and a lot of managers will have had no experience. And have we taken the opportunity to teach them how to manage in this situation? From our point of view at HR Go, we've had to adjust quite a bit, and I've got a couple of slides here really just to allow me to talk through it, how we've had to adapt, one with our clients who in the past we would have expected to go out and see on a regular basis and to meet with them online. How can we still give them the information that they need? Equally for our candidates, how can we actually recruit people for our clients without meeting them? How can we see their documents? How can we verify that and make sure that they have a right to work? And we've very much adopted technology in this process, but now we have over 2,500 candidates each week registering with us online. And I think my CIO gave me the figures the other day, which was something like 250,000 documents have been uploaded to the system by those individuals that normally we would have probably had people coming into an office and having to take photocopiers. That's a challenge in its own right because, and one not for today, but GDPR for a recruiter is a very difficult thing and of utmost concern to us in terms of the way that we handle that data. From our point of view, equally, technology is a differentiator with our clients, and we've had to move one step ahead. And from a client portal point of view, we allow all our clients at no extra charge to be able to budget their staff online and to also see for their own side the amount of spend. They can see the hours worked by any individual. It's all something that comes with a service. And I think one of the effects of COVID generally on the recruitment sector and talent acquisition, you will see much more of this, hopefully from whichever agency that you do use. I think one of the things that I've already talked about was the initial impact of COVID and how it did affect our businesses. And I think it probably sent a shock to us all how quickly the demand for our product or service could change. And therefore, from our point of view, having a flexible workforce is really important. And I think we as a recruiter have seen this already with our clients looking perhaps to hire more temporary labour rather than necessarily permanent labour until some of the certainty resolves itself. And certainly we at HR Go, having in the early days taken an opportunity to reduce our employee headcount. Gladly, as you saw, the business has grown and we have had to hire again to fulfill that demand. But equally, we've taken the opportunity to use temporary labour even within our own business. Upskilling, consumer behaviour changes. I think upskilling, a good example there that I can give you is that attached to our recruitment business, we also have an e-commerce business, and one of their clients, prior to COVID, their figures for online shopping was something in the sort of 25 to 30% mark, relatively high. At the time, I think back in 2019, the average for online shopping was something nearer to 19%. But we've seen that grown tremendously. And I'm sure for each and every one of you, the sight of the delivery driver in your drive, the courier driver delivering another package, certainly it happens at my household. And I think, you know, consumer behavior has changed and probably will change for good. That this slide shows really a comparison of the week or the period commencing the 12th of January to the 28th January, when clearly Britain was in lockdown, Germany was in lockdown. Some of these other countries weren't in lockdown, and therefore the figures are very changed. But what is very evident here is the fact that across the world, the change, even in the United States, the amount of people shopping in retail shops is down 20%, whereas the figures for us in January were 78%. And I think the stats on the amount of online shopping is yet to come out. But certainly, I think there's a feeling that at least 1/3 of shopping is currently done online. And we see that through another of our clients, the Post Office, Royal Mail, who normally they would hire labour for the Christmas period just to ensure that they cope with the Christmas rush. But that Christmas period has continued through right into January, February, with the demand of packages being delivered. So I suppose in terms of COVID, and it's opportune today that I think the Chancellor is speaking at 12:30 and we'll hear more. And when I wrote my notes, I put in the question, will he extend furlough? And gladly that does seem the case today, that he is announcing that. But we need to understand that since furlough started, over 11.2 million people have been paid through furlough. And in January alone, there were 4.7 million people still on the furlough leave payments. So it is going to create a trouble when furlough eventually does leave. And I suppose from my point of view, equally, as taxpayers, we need to remember that at some stage we need to pay our bills, and how will this hit us? And I think the budget today hopefully will show some transparency to this as to whether national insurance is going to be impacted, fuel duty or corporation tax, and maybe even the Chancellor will target the self-employed, who seems to have had it good for some time. And obviously IR35 is something else that is about to become part of even for the private sector. And I think therefore it wasn't with much surprise that I read in the Independent at the weekend, but certainly there were measures to boost apprenticeships for young in the wake of COVID pandemic would likely be some of the initiatives being taken. This graph is an interesting one on the basis that it is just focused very much on the southeast and shows those job postings over that time and reflects in more detail what I've already shown you for the UK. But you can see how the double dip now has happened in terms of from being down in the sort of early June to where we are today. So I suppose before I move on to Brexit, what I would say is, are you thinking about the opportunities in your future strategy? And what roles are essential for your business to deliver the strategic values that you desire? How can you make your workforce more flexible? Could you benefit from outsourced help to make this transition? How might you upskill your current workforce to better deliver your current objectives? And finally, how could you use technology and automation to deliver efficiency and ensure you hire more effectively for the future? So then turning to Brexit and the challenges, and Tessa has already given you a very good run through of the legal technicalities and challenges of it. But I think again, it's interesting how we are now starting to see the real impact of what Brexit means, compared to back in 2013, when 77% were stated as saying that definitely they wanted to see a reduction in immigration. Employment levels and the quality of jobs are partly a political choice. It is not the market which mainly determines how many people are in work, but the extent to which people are encouraged to be in paid work or not. A government can certainly decide to make it more or less attractive to be in work. And maybe we see this with the effect of universal credit and furthermore the Furley scheme. The UK may no longer be a member of the EU, but the ongoing transition period means the impact of its departure is really yet to be felt. And I think I would warn you on that we are still in a honeymoon period in terms of transition. Looking at EU migration and how it has fallen, I think the government would be very pleased with what has happened in terms of the numbers falling and the net migration figure now being around the 50,000 mark. And I think we haven't felt the effect of this in the last year because of COVID, because the demand for services has been lower. So actually there has been more people available to fill those jobs. And certainly as a business, when we have been doing some of our temporary work for essential services in the last 11 months, we have seen for test and trace or for national testing units, we have seen pilots volunteering for work to top up their money whilst they can't work themselves. And so that temporary labour has been taken by other people. But I think the warning here is that when the economy gets back to some sort of normality, that the pressures of the lack of the EU migration will be felt more heavily. And I think the sectors and business needs will be affected disproportionately. This quote talks about accommodation and food service. Thinking of your stays in hotels, has it always been the English person that has looked after you, or even in restaurants? And therefore, it is going to affect different sectors in different ways. And I think this is shown very easily on our insights that we've got of our temporary workforce. Hopefully you can see this sufficiently on your screens, but you can see from back in 2017, the figure there, the blue line starts at 45%. That is the number of people we identified at that time working for us in terms of our temporary labour staff, compared to the 100% that we were employing. Apologies for the grey area, but it was more about recording and the fact that we didn't record nationalities rather than the fact that they really were undefined people. But at the same time, what you can see is the closing of the non-UK staff over that period and how the numbers have grown today. And if I look specifically at our Ashford branch, the results are slightly less dramatic, but back in 2016, 52% were British, whereas that has risen to 64.6% today. And interestingly, over that time, the Nepalese have stayed a very constant 6% over those years. And the reduction has come from mostly Polish and Romanians going home. Those data can be a little bit swayed by the fact that just in terms of the hiring you're doing and tapping into different populations, but I think taking that 4 or 5 year trend, it's an interesting observation. Tessa has already gone through the different schemes and things, and gladly my slide does very much support her slide that anyone arriving in the UK before the 31st of December can still apply under the EU settlement scheme. I think what I would caution about is that at the moment, certainly as an agency, we can't make people apply because they can still rely on their EU passport for the intervening period. But certainly I would encourage you to get all your workers to apply in plenty of time before the deadline. Some commentators predict great opportunities for the UK economy following Brexit, particularly in relation to technology and science. And as perhaps we're already seeing with our vaccine manufacturers, but this may cause shortages in the future. And as Tessa referred to, already scientists are on that shortages list. So we need to be aware of that in terms of the sector that we work in. The TCA contains reciprocal commitments not to reduce the level of protection for workers or fail to enforce employment rights in a manner that has effect on trade. And as such, UK measures implementing the Working Time Directive, which gives workers the right to paid holiday, etc., the Agency Workers Directive and the Acquired Rights Directive of i.e. TUPE will be retained in UK law. So we need to again be careful of that, of new EU hires coming into the country. Business do need to consider what they offer to new hires on the new global stage and ensure a clear value proposition to your existing workforce is just as important to ensure you retain the best talent and attract the new talent. EU workers, as Tessa has already alluded to, will require more support than before in making the leap to move and work in the UK. And equally, I think there is an expense involved, and Tessa has already shown you that. Just touching very briefly on our Australian experience and how we've gone about things there. And to give you an idea, to go into Australia, you need to be a graduate with a minimum of 2 years work experience. Or if you haven't got that experience, then you need to have 7 years working experience. The acceptance certainly isn't automatic. It's only possible when you go through this whole process of applying. And I think also the experience in a sector needs to be very specific. It needs to be niche if possible and really distinguished from others. And I think as Tessa has already alluded to, the level of salary is also needs to be considered. Coming into the UK, you'll be classed differently depending on the salary that you are earning. But equally, going into Australia, the evidence there is that they don't want people being hired cheaply, creating an imbalance in the Australian labour market. And therefore, I think that's interesting because people have referred to the Australian experience as being one that we would like to model ourselves on. And so finally, I suppose from my point of view, I said I'd talk to you about some of the challenges of COVID and Brexit. And in summary, they have provided an unprecedented set of challenges. As business owners, you should be thinking now about setting and delivering their talent strategies. Companies should think innovatively about their people needs, whether using flexible supply, utilising technology and automation, and adjusting operations and services for new customers, behaviours, or upskilling their existing workforce. And finally, hiring and retaining excellent people are at the heart of your success, and businesses should pay a lot of attention to this. Thank you very much for listening. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Roddy. That's a very succinct description of a very different playing field that we all find ourselves in now, rather than even a year ago. You were talking about having to. I used to also commute to Guildford twice a week, so you have my sympathies for that particular journey. M25, M26.
I think you went the worst way though, Martin, probably.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Yes, I was going the wrong way during the rush hour, so I had the queue for the A3. I have to say, I also used to regularly travel to Wrocław for about 5 years, I suppose, once or twice a month, and that was a much better prospect, I have to say. Actually, this one is probably an invitation for another webinar. It's saying, this is sort of an observation came out through the chat, that I've found HRGO employees are doing a lot more on social media to fill roles. And I think a lot of companies would benefit from knowing how to attract skilled and experienced employees via social media, rather than just anyone needing a job and sort of filtering out through the normal process. I suppose it's sort of looking for guidance on how companies can be more proactive in publicising their opportunities. What's the thinking there?
I think social media is something that we pay a lot of heed to, and as you say, you've probably seen a bit more of it. And furthermore, I've just hired a search engine optimization person in terms of actually a lady from the States, on the basis of strengthening our skills across that social media piece. And I think we have to go with the flow, and I only need to turn to my children to understand the different applications that they are using now, whether it be WhatsApp initially, and now it's gone on to Instagram and other platforms, as to how people are doing it. And I think therefore, from our point of view, and this is, I have to say, worked great for us in terms of that we have done pay-per-click online in terms of advertising our jobs, because if they are top of the list, you will benefit. And certainly we've had times when we've been hiring 1,000 people, and that has been very key to that process.
Mm. What sort of preparation have you made? Presumably, if the projections are anywhere near correct, there's going to be over the next few months, there's going to be a huge number of very highly skilled as well as lower skilled workers coming onto the job market as businesses begin to shrink a little bit. What preparations have you made? Obviously, presumably from your point of view, that makes dealing with high numbers of very highly skilled workers quite a nightmare from your side, is it?
Yes and no. I think it's very interesting. I mean, in our own business at the moment, we're trying to hire finance staff. That because we've expanded, we've needed more people, and that's been a real challenge to find good quality candidates. And I think it may be something that other people are aware of, that actually getting people to jump ship from their current employment is currently quite difficult, because people are very grateful for the job security that they've earned over the years. Equally, they don't know, they perceive the risk of changing jobs at this point as a risk to their welfare and future employment. I think it will be very interesting. Sorry, I'm croaking here. It'll be interesting to see going forward how business does react. And I think the Chancellor's done a very sensible thing today by extending furlough further, because otherwise the cliff may happen sooner than it should do.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose this is probably something that Colin will come on to Colin shortly. Colin will touch on, but I guess the moment, that sort of the in between area where we're no longer talking about jobs being necessarily office based with some home working, but from a recruitment point of view, how does an employer keep the options open? So you sort of start off with a job that is partially or mainly home based for the moment, but you've got to keep your option open that if eventually in a year's time or whatever the playing field has changed and the emphasis is much more on office based work, then how do you go about describing that or ensuring that's fully understood in the recruitment process, particularly if you're talking about people who are applying from from far away on the basis that they will be able to work from home?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was listening with interest with what Tessa said, really, in terms of our Polish staff, because they used to commute fairly regularly to the UK, and it wasn't just a case of senior management. They were supporting our clients in the UK, so we would quite often fly 20 of them across for a meet with their client to develop new things with them, and I think it is a real challenge. And I wrote some notes myself to take away from this call, actually, in terms of to look at that, because again, there starts to be an expense of if every employee needs a £95 visa every 6 months. We had an example that we had a conference, and we flew every employee from Poland to Maidstone in Kent and put them up in a hotel for a couple of nights. Now, you know, that's going to create a different dynamic on those sort of decisions going forward, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Roddy, thank you very much for now. Then we move on to our last speaker, Colin Smith, and I'll leave you to do the introductions and take it from here, and then we'll come back. We should have some time at the end. We'll come back for a few general Q&As at the end. Roddy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Over to you, Colin.
Thank you. And is it good afternoon? It's still good morning to everybody. My name's Colin Smith. I'm an employment lawyer at Brachers, and I've picked up the end of today's session looking at COVID vaccination, not necessarily because it's specifically immigration related, but it is rather a hot topic, we think, at the moment. And there are actually some angles based on what Roddy's just been discussing about how this might play in if you are bringing in employees from overseas, where who the heck knows what the local vaccine regime is there or what stage it's at, which will add to yet more complexities of the situation. Most of it we've been looking at so far from a UK point of view, but if you're importing your employees from elsewhere, then it becomes even more fun and games, I'm afraid. So hopefully everybody can see the slides. Hopefully everybody can hear me. We are going to try and run some polls today. I caveat that with this is the first time we've tried to run them using Zoom, so bear with us if it doesn't go quite technically to plan. If it doesn't go to plan, it's Neil and Martin's fault. That's all I'm saying. It has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, you can blame me, Colin. Blame me.
Yeah. Definitely not my fault. No. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully it'll work. We shall see. So that's the slide about me. I won't bore you. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I do employment law in all its various guises. So that's about that. You can read that to your heart's content if you're really bored. So welcome to today's session. I'm going to try and fill about the next 25-30 minutes to leave us time at the end for some Q&As and for some more general Q&As. So what we're going to look at? Well, we're going to look at some simple questions, at least in theory. The questions are simple, the answers not so much, I'm afraid. So firstly, well, can I make my employees go and get vaccinated? Secondly, if they won't, can I fire them or not employ them in the first place? Can I make them take tests? And what can I do to my customers if you're even minded to try and go that far? Okay, we'll look at the questions, we'll debate the issues, and we'll come to the conclusion that nobody really knows. So I warn you in advance that is probably where we will end up, but you will at least go away from this understanding why nobody really knows yet, and why it's ultimately then a commercial call at the end of the day for you to have to take, bearing in mind the risk. Okay, so we're going to try the polls now. Because of the way we set this up, we may have to run all of our polls in one go, so there'll be 2 or 3 separate polls here to run, but I just want to get a sense check of the audience to see where people are at in terms of, are you considering actually getting people to be vaccinated at this time? Okay, so if you bear with me 1 second, I am just going to try and get up the screen that we need to run the polls. Let me just see. Can anybody run the poll for me? Because I can't currently find the button because I'm presenting it, shrunk my screen.
Yeah, is it showing up now? No. Okay, 1 second.
No, not
That's
yet.
right. Ah, that's right. I found the button. See, we knew this would go slickly, this bit. Oh yeah, I can see the poll now and I can see people are voting. Fabulous, marvelous. Thank you for doing that. So we'll just give that a few seconds to let people put their votes down. And I will just make it a bit bigger so that I can actually see the results.
I can't actually see that. Is everybody else seeing it?
I can see it.
Yeah, I've got it.
It may be that it won't show until we end the polling, but
I
what I'll
can't
do.
see the poll at the moment.
Okay, well, I can see that people are voting. So let me end the polling and we'll see what we get. And hopefully what you may get, if I put this over here, can you now see what we have?
What we can do, Colin, do you want me to relaunch it so everyone can see it? Because I think there was quite a few people that didn't see it. So I'll relaunch, Colin, if that's all right.
That's all right. Yeah. Relaunch the poll. Hopefully people can see what's on the screen.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's cool.
Can you see
Good.
now?
Yeah, I've put the
Yep.
sort of screen up on what I'm broadcasting, so hopefully you can see our poll and vote away.
Yeah.
And then it should hopefully show you the sort of running, there we go, the running tallies as we go. It's always fun when you try something new.
Yeah. There we go. It's all working quite well now.
I'll just give everyone a few seconds. We've got a bit of time. We'll give you the 50 seconds, 10 seconds to go, just to see if everyone's can put their body in what they want to put in.
You've missed your other vocation in life, Colin.
Right, let's see what we've got. Okay, so are you considering requiring your employees to get vaccinated? Yes, quite a lot of you are, which is interesting. It's higher than when we ran this in a different session we did the other day. It's interesting how the sort of viewpoints on this are fluctuating even over a short period of time at the moment. Are you actually considering getting rid of people if they refuse? Not so much. So most people aren't. What is your current? Are you currently doing testing? Some of you are doing it and it's mandatory. Some of you are doing it as voluntarily. Some of you aren't. 50%, 25%. So that's an interesting split on the whole testing piece. And none of you are currently, somehow 125% of us voted for not getting customers to be vaccinated, which is a good effort. Not sure how we managed that, but never mind. Cool. Thank you for participating in that. And thank you for being the sort of test bed for us trying that out. So can you make your employees take the vaccine, actually physically go and get it? And the short answer is no, you can't. It's illegal. Okay, it's illegal on a number of levels. If you try and actually stick a needle in somebody's arm without their consent, well, that's criminal offence and an assault and God knows what else. So don't go around just jabbing people with needles. It would also be a breach of all manner of professional obligations by the person handing out the vaccine to not do it without clear informed consent. So, and the government at the moment, under a very old act from the early 80s, does have a rule that says it's actually illegal for the government to compel people to take the vaccine as the law currently stands. So the government can't force us to do it unless they change the law. And obviously we can't force people to actually do it. And medical professionals will not do it without their clear consent at the time. Okay. The real question is, if they don't want to get vaccinated or if they refuse to follow an instruction or a policy to get vaccinated, can you dismiss them or refuse to employ them? And I'm afraid that this slide has the backdrop of a fence for a good reason, and that's because we're about to firmly sit on one, I'm afraid. Okay. The honest answer is, and Tessa may have a different view because she's also an employment lawyer, I appreciate, but the honest answer is maybe it depends and we don't really know just yet. Okay. The one thing that we do know is that it's going to be very hard with safety and certainty from a legal perspective to set a one-size-fits-all rule that has no flexibility in it for individual cases. Okay. And we'll go through some of the reasons or some of the areas where this gets pretty complicated. Okay. So the first issue is whether or not a generic rule, a provision, criterion, or practice, as the employment lawyers would call it, that says you must have the vaccine, is a matter of, is that going to prove to be discriminatory? Okay. For generally speaking, would it be indirectly discriminatory? So we have a rule that says everyone must get the vaccine, but it could put particular protected groups at a specific disadvantage, as it were. Okay. And those main groups at the moment will be those with disabilities, possibly those with philosophical beliefs, possibly some with religious beliefs. There is an element of ageism at the moment simply because of the way in which the government is rolling out the vaccine program. And there are question marks about whether or not pregnant women should be taking the vaccine or not that are still being resolved. Okay. And this therefore lends itself to a number of areas of discrimination law where you could run into hot water with a general rule. Okay. So as we say, it's primarily from an indirect discrimination risk. If you set this rule, there could also then be, in a disability context, a risk under what we call Section 15, which is discrimination arising from the consequences of someone's disability. So if the consequences of someone's disability means they can't take the vaccine, then obviously that could get you into hot water there. And there might also then be issues with disabled people around reasonable adjustments. Okay, so there are a number of issues with disabled employees where their disability means they're not in a position to take the vaccine, and whether you then have to make reasonable adjustments to your rule that says you have to have the vaccine to accommodate those. Now, the truth of it is that the number of situations in which you're going to face actual disabled employees who actually have a disability that actually means they can't take the vaccine is probably statistically very low. Okay. So whilst the employment lawyers all talk and speculate about the theoretical risk that a one-size-fits-all, you must have a vaccine policy could be discriminatory, bear in mind that when you come to look at the commercial versus the legal balance of this for your business, what are the actual likelihood of you having someone who ticks those boxes? They may be actually in practice very low. Okay. It's the same when we then get into this wider debate about whether you can argue that an anti-vaccination belief is a protected philosophical belief in law, okay? Or whether an objection to medical treatment is a protected philosophical belief or falls under a protected religious belief, whether objections to certain animal products, albeit my understanding at the moment is none of the current vaccines in the UK contain any, but we are going to see further vaccines come along in the future, so they might well do. Okay, so at the moment, we just don't know if anti-vaccination beliefs would be found by a court to be a protected philosophical belief. Okay, there are going to be complex arguments about whether an anti-vaxxer can show that that's a sufficiently cogent belief system, that it has a significantly material impact on the way they live their day-to-day life, for example. Okay. And then there are going to be even more fun theoretical arguments about whether such a belief is worthy of respect in a democratic society. Okay. The honest answer is we just don't know. In my view, I think that they are going to struggle to overcome those tests because it's hard to show how not believing in vaccines has a dramatic wider impact on the way they live their lives. Okay. So the closest example we've got is a recent case of a vegan who did persuade the court that because he was at the extreme end of veganism, yeah, he was a person who was able to show that he didn't drive and he tried to avoid getting on the bus because they killed insects when they crashed into them. He was at that extreme end, and he was able to show that that meant that being a vegan did have this serious effect on the way he lived his life, and therefore it was a protected belief. I think anti-vaxxers are going to struggle to show that it has that degree of impact on the way they choose to go about their lives. Okay, but it's a totally untested, so we'll have to just watch this space. You then get into the issue of age discrimination. Okay, now at the moment, if you were to introduce a rule that says you have to have a vaccine, you run a risk of age discrimination because of the way in which the vaccine program in the UK is being rolled out. Okay, put simply, younger employees would be disadvantaged because they haven't even had the choice as yet. But I don't think anyone is currently envisaging doing this right now. But obviously, depending on the point at which you consider bringing this in, you'd have to look at whether or not you're going to run into indirect age discrimination risks. Okay, I think most businesses, however, would not roll this out and say you have to have a vaccine when you can't actually get one, because that would be slightly, unfortunately, difficult for employees to meet. Okay. As we say, there are ongoing complexities over pregnancy and breastfeeding and those planning to get pregnant. When I did this a couple of weeks ago, the advice was against giving the vaccine to pregnant women or breastfeeding women. As I understand it today, it's now that it's not routinely recommended for pregnant or those planning to get pregnant, but they can talk to their doctors because there are pros and cons, and it's not that they can't have it, it's just that there are other things to think about. Okay. So again, it could run into greater challenges in the sex and pregnancy discrimination area. There is then our good old-fashioned unfair dismissal. And the question here that the employment lawyers are debating to our heart's content at the moment in great fascinating theoretical degree, which is it actually a reasonable management instruction to insist on a vaccination if you don't have a specific contractual power saying that you can? And I don't know about you, but I don't remember seeing any contracts of employment outside of some very specialist healthcare situations that say you will get a vaccination. And understandably, none of them say you'll get a COVID-19 vaccination because we'd never heard of it. Okay. So it is highly unlikely you will have an explicit contractual right to say to people they must get a vaccine as it stands. The question, therefore, is it a reasonable management instruction to say you must get the vaccine? I personally think it's arguable that it is, even without an explicit clause, either under general duties of cooperation or general health and safety duties, but not yet tested, I'm afraid. Okay. The second issue is, even if it's a reasonable instruction, is it reasonable to dismiss somebody for refusal? And the answer to that, again, is we don't know what a court is going to make of that argument. What we suspect they're going to look at is, was that really the only choice? In other words, what were you trying to achieve by having your vaccination rule? And was you must have a vaccination really the only fair way to achieve that? For example, could you have used alternative PPE? Could you have used alternative social distancing? Could they have worked from home? Is there a different job they could move to? And all of these issues have to come into play before you get to whether or not the dismissal is fair. And unfortunately, that means that there isn't a one-size-fits-all rule to this, because you're going to have to look at every single case in the individual circumstances of every single person's business. Okay, and there will be some businesses where there is a stronger case that vaccine is really the only practical measure, and there will be other businesses where it's much harder to make that case. Okay, because all of these other options, short of insisting on vaccine, could potentially give you the protection you need. And then there are a host of other fun and games issues. So obviously, if you are now collecting information on people about whether they've got a vaccination or not, that's sensitive data for data protection reasons. So you'll have to think about all of that. You'll have to consider whether it would be appropriate to do a data protection impact assessment, because you're materially changing the nature of the data that you are collecting and processing. Okay. If you are going to introduce new vaccination policies, you're also going to have to look at health and safety law and update any of the risk assessments that you've all, of course, done to date to deal with social distancing, remote working, etc., and how those then interact with the fact that part of your health and safety processes is now having your employees vaccinated. Okay, and then the big potentially scary question. Well, what if you insist all your employees get vaccinated and 5 years down the line, it turns out there are problems? Now, I hesitate to add, there's absolutely no evidence of that at the moment, and I'm not suggesting that there are, but it is a question that I have been asked by a number of clients, which is, if we do this and it goes a bit wrong, are we in trouble? The honest answer is, I can't see how you would clearly be, because at the moment there is no evidence to indicate that there is any problem, and these are properly government approved vaccines. So it's hard to see how an employer would be getting itself into specific hot water by asking people to take them. Okay, but you never know. And then you have to look at the logic and rationale of why you're requiring someone to take the vaccine. And the debate here is, well, it is still a developing area of science as to quite who it protects and to what degree. Okay, and over time, we believe that the impact that the vaccine has on preventing transmission is going to be actually critical to justifying a vaccine requirement. Okay, because if the vaccine protects me, stops me getting seriously ill, stops me being hospitalized, which the evidence seems to indicate that it does, but it doesn't stop me being a source of transmission to others, albeit the initial results are that it seems to have a good impact on that as well. But if it doesn't stop me being a carrier or a transmitter, well, then I'm still a threat to everyone else in the workplace, vaccinated or not. Protecting myself, but I'm not protecting anyone else. Okay. But if by my taking the vaccine, I also reduce significantly or remove my transmission risk, then that is far greater value to an employer in terms of their broader risk to their other staff and to their customers and clients. Okay. So that's going to be an interesting area to keep an eye on, is what is the science on whether myself having the vaccine stops me being a source of transmission, because if it doesn't, it becomes harder to justify a vaccination requirement to protect others. I hope that makes sense. Okay. At the moment, as I say, the science seems to indicate with one of the vaccines that it does seem to have a reducing impact on transmission, but this is all very early stages. Obviously, there are huge practical issues at the moment in terms of rolling out a no jab, no job policy. Okay. The first one is that obviously nobody actually controls when and how they get the vaccine at the moment. No employer does and the employees don't. Okay. There is also at the moment, and it's been much talked about in the political side of it, there's at the moment no clear established way of proving you've actually had the vaccine, other than getting a copy of your whole medical records. And to be honest, GPs, etc., have got plenty to do without worrying about that at the moment. Okay. It's also not currently clear how long your vaccine jab will last for. So, because it's no point just having a policy that says you'll get the jab. If you don't, it's a bit like work permits in a way. You know, there's no point having one and then not having a process for checking and renewing it, because once your jab's out of date, well, you're no longer protected. Okay. But at the moment, we're not very clear on how regularly you'd need to renew these things, or how you're going to be able to even do that. Okay. So what rules would you actually set for the requirement to get a refreshed jab? At the moment, we just don't know what you can say. The government have talked about it being a sort of annual jab, a bit like the flu jab, but the truth is it's all very speculative. So the answer to that, we'll skip over our polls because we've already done these. Yeah. So that's the sort of the arguments in broad terms, and I'm sure we can go through any questions at the end. Can you make employees take COVID tests? Well, again, you can't insist they take a test. Even if you've got a contractual right or power, you might, employment law, be able to insist they take a test and dismiss or discipline them if they don't. You can't obviously physically make them take a test for the same reason you can't physically give them an injection. Okay. Can you dismiss them if they refuse to participate in a testing program? The honest answer is, again, it's very untested law. It's going to come down to how strong a justification you have for the need to have that testing program in place. And again, whether or not you can use lesser measures to achieve the aims. Now, normally the aims will be health and safety related, and it may well be easier to justify a testing program than possibly a vaccination program. Okay, but the honest answer is it's just not absolutely legally clear whether you can or can't. I do still, however, know a number of employers who are doing that, and largely speaking, it hasn't been objected to by their employees where they're doing it for good reasons and they're doing it in a proper professional manner. Okay. Data protection, if you are looking at doing a testing program, the Information Commissioner's Office has a link, it's in the slides, to their guidance on what you should do with all the data and how you should manage that in terms of running a testing program. So if you are considering that, do go and have a look at it. Okay. And if you are running your own private testing system or you're looking to do so, there is some very detailed government guidance, it's in the link in the slides, that takes you through in effect, the regulatory requirements for running your own private testing program as an employer. It talks about the different test types that you can do. It talks about the medical devices regulations that underpin these tests. And it talks about obligations, even in private testing, where there are positive results, to inform the test and trace system. Okay. The TUC's general position is that we shouldn't enforce testing or vaccination, but I do know a number of sites where they're unionised, where they're doing testing, and they don't seem to have a major issue with it in practice. Okay. So what are businesses actually saying? Well, a few of them have hit the headlines. Pimlico Plumbers hit the headlines first with their no jab, no job phrase, and promising to pay for vaccines for their workers. Bear in mind that for Pimlico Plumbers, they don't necessarily employ their staff, or at least that's their position. So it's slightly different to the normal situation, but their position is you can't come and be one of our plumbers if you won't have the vaccine. They've come out and said, we've been advised it's definitely lawful. We'll wait and see as to what the courts make of it, because they are rather setting themselves up to be the test case. Okay. Other companies, a very large Kent-based holiday company came out and spoke about potentially requiring all their customers to have vaccines before they get on cruise ships. Okay, pointing out that they believed it was what their customers would want to protect themselves and give them the comfort traveling. But again, it's going to raise interesting potential discrimination issues for them in the delivery of their services. Okay, but again, then I would imagine for both of these, they've looked at the legal risks which exist theoretically, but query how much in practice they might apply. And they've also then looked at the commercial situation of having a very clear, our staff are vaccinated or your fellow holidaymakers will be vaccinated. And I'm taking a risk sort of balance view on what's going to put them in the best position. Okay. So can you insist your customers are vaccinated? Again, there's no legal basis for doing so. And the government's position is that we're not going to go down that route and insist it. It would actually raise other discrimination issues. So where in the Equality Act there are lots of provisions about obviously discriminating against employees or candidates or applicants for jobs, there are also other entire sections of that act that rarely get seen on discrimination in the provision of services. Okay, so if you were looking to be specific about customers getting vaccinated, you still have to think about all these discrimination risks just from a customer perspective, not from an employee perspective. Okay. You'd also have to look at who you're aiming to protect, whether it be proportionate, and a number of complex issues. Okay. But the thing, data protection, I will skip over because we've gone through that and you can read that to your heart's content. And I want to leave time for questions and people. I just want to talk about the other practical issue, which is vaccine passports. Okay. Originally, the government came out and said, we're definitely not doing vaccine passports. Okay. Or we're not doing any kind of official confirmation that people have had a vaccine. So the challenge for employers is multitude. It's should you actually have a rule that says you need a vaccine? And if you do, how do you then get your employees to evidence and prove that they have done? Okay. And how they then evidence that they've got it renewed and so on and so forth. And at the moment, the government has said we're not going to put in place any kind of official system for doing that. However, there does seem to be a developing change of direction on that, based on the fact that if other countries say you need to be able to prove you've had the vaccine to come here, we are going to end up with some kind of system of proving you've had the vaccine, which it may then be that employers can piggyback on the back of to ask their employees to prove they've had the vaccine, if that makes sense. Okay. But at the moment, it doesn't exist. So at the moment, even if you put a rule in, you'd be relying on your employees to tell you the truth, unless you're going to go as far as saying, I now require you to write to your GP and get a copy of your medical records proving to me you had the jab, which is a massive undertaking if you're doing this on any significant scale. Okay. I know that's a whistle-stop tour in the time we've got, but I wanted to make sure we left some time at the end for questions and for questions on any of the other sessions that we've covered this morning. I can't see the chat feed at the moment to see if we've got any questions.
Okay, yep. Thank you very much, Colin. That was great. Yes, there a couple of questions have come in, which is one is actually quite pertinent to what we're discussing here. If you're recruiting or accepting staff coming in from overseas, what's the vaccination point there? Can you insist that they've had the vaccination before they come?
I suppose the difficulty is thinking out loud. Well, you can insist, but practically can they? So, for example, I don't know what the vaccination program situation is in France or in Italy or in Croatia or in Australia. Yeah.
Yeah.
So having a rule that says, if you introduce a rule in the UK that says you must have the vaccine, one, what does that actually mean? Because there are, let's say, greater question marks about the efficacy of some of the vaccines being used in some places. Yep. So when we say you've got to have the vaccine, well, are all vaccines going to be equal? Who knows? Yep.
Yep.
How far are we going to go in specifying types of vaccine and whether they're good enough? I don't know. Yeah.
Any vaccine bar the Russian one, I presume.
Well, I've heard remarkable figures about the efficacy of their vaccine.
Yes, yes.
But you know, who knows? But it does raise then other questions, actually thinking out loud, which is, you know, if you do and they can't, or if you do and they can't get the one you want, you are then running into even more complex, potentially race discrimination issues based on nationality and everything else. So it adds yet another layer of complexity to this whole debate if it's not as simple as you must have the vaccine. Yeah. And to be fair, at the moment, we are ahead of most of the world in our vaccine rollout program. So there is a good chance, if you're looking at a wider global recruitment pool, short of Israel, I think they will be behind us on this at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay, and you did touch on it a bit, but where are you as far as insistence on some sort of vaccine really for health workers, people working in a healthcare environment? Where are you? Where are we sort of there on that?
That's right. I mean, the argument on all of this comes down to, from a discrimination law, it comes down to, do you have a legitimate aim and proportionality? And from an unfair dismissal law, it comes down to reasonableness and fairness, but they're not quite the same. But in essence, that comes down to how well can you justify the need for the rule? Okay. And obviously, if you're in a healthcare environment with more vulnerable service users, patients, clients, whatever you want to call them, then you may well have a stronger health and safety justification for a vaccination requirement rule than if, for example, you work in a solicitor's firm. Yep. Yeah. So it's this proportionality balance of, in that environment, you are going to have a stronger case to justify why, given the close proximity, given that there will not necessarily be obvious lesser measures that will give you the same protection, and given that the risk to your patients is quite severe, that may well enable you to build a greater justification case. Okay. In mine and Tessa's environment, it might be quite hard to justify you must have a vaccination because we don't work in that same close contact environment. There are lesser measures. One of those measures is what we're currently doing, which is all working from home. Yeah. So
I guess the guidance is, if you're thinking of bringing in a restriction of any sort on that front, then it's best to work the plan out for yourself and then check either with yourself or with Tessa or with an employment law specialist, just so that you understand the potential implications of that, both good and bad.
Yeah, I mean, as we say, it's one of these situations where if someone came to me with this issue, I would say, can I give you a definitive legal answer of is it safe or is it not? And the honest answer is no, we can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
What we can do is take you through the risk and say, these are the risks. This is our experience of the likelihood and the reality of it. Yeah. And this is what it frankly would probably cost or do to your reputation if the worst came to the worst. Yeah. You've then got to make a business judgment of balancing that against what you need to do to get your business to work. Yeah. And frankly, also, I'm afraid, what your competitors are doing. Because if you're in the healthcare business, you're in any business, and your competitors are going, all of our staff are vaccinated, this is safe, and that's helping them attract business, that is going to unfortunately lead into, well, what can we do? Yeah.
Good point. Okay. I think we probably, thank you very much for that. I think we sort of moved into, we've got a few minutes left for some sort of general comment, but I think one that I noticed the other day, which is as far as the general employment law governing now people who are working from home, I understand that employers have a responsibility to make sure they're properly equipped. And I mean, I don't know really as far as a sort of health and safety, how much an employer can you know, if they're working off a coffee table or something like that, got their laptop on the coffee table and sitting on the sofa, and they suddenly put their back out. Where are we as far as employers having to take responsibility for industrial injuries at home or in a home working environment?
This is where you're asking two employment lawyers a health and safety question, and we're both going, my understand. I'm not a health and safety expert. I have a colleague who is, okay, but we have certainly, let's say, since home working became more than temporary, we have done home working assessments, whether it be ergonomic and whether it be health and safety. Okay, so we have put out to our staff working from home, in effect, requirements to complete ergonomic assessments about their setup for exactly the reasons you said about they're not sitting on a couch hunched over all day, every day. We've also put out requests for them to do home assessments of things like PAT safety and electrical safety as best as we can, that they're not sat here with a cable like this that's frayed and keeps electrocuting them. Yeah, or they're not just stepping over the plug because it fell off about 3 months ago, but I haven't got around to sorting it. Yeah. So, but on a serious note, yes, we are therefore asking home workers to do, in effect, home risk assessments. Yeah. Because this home working has gone from being an occasional temporary thing to an almost quasi permanent thing for now. Yeah. And obviously going forward, if you're going to have people working at home as part of their normal working relationship, then yes, you probably ought to make sure you've got those health and safety assessments in place to protect you against, as you say, people putting their backs out, people hunched over, etc., etc.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure Tessa's now going to give us exactly the opposite view. That'll leave us.
No, 100% agree. That's exactly what we've done as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I mean, it is something I just sort of it was just mentioned briefly. It was one line in the newspaper, and I thought that's a very interesting situation. Again, with sort of working environment and all this sort of thing. It's okay, as usual, I'm sure the employer will be left holding the baby, but then how do you control it? I mean, I think that's it. It comes back to there's a certain amount of, well, just with any you have an advisor there, I see. It comes down to each employee having to take responsibility for their own environment, really, doesn't it? But I mean, I suppose, yes, reminders to everybody that they should be checking and being mindful of the fact that they must be working in a safe environment.
I mean, we've done risk assessments from the very beginning. We've also done lone working assessments just to be on the safe side. And in effect, in our environment, that's not highly risky, if you know what I mean, because we're all sitting at home in our own houses. We're not out on a building site in the middle of nowhere on our own. But so our countermeasures to the fact that people are in effect working alone is, well, we have regular calls. We talk to each other. We make sure that there's always that contact going on so we know people are all right. That's part of a separate well-being issue as well.
Yeah.
When you see people stuck at home on their own, it's that interaction. It's not leaving someone working at home for days on end without any interaction or check that just they're doing okay. So we've done all of that sort of stuff, as you say, as well as we've also given our home working staff an allowance to go and buy the right kit.
Yeah.
But once this became more than temporary, we've given them all a sum of money to go and buy appropriate computer equipment, appropriate ergonomic equipment, so that they can work at home in a proper manner.
I see that was another thing in the newspaper yesterday, that some of the MPs have got quite exotic with their required equipment and weren't exactly buying entry-level computers and things like that. So that's an interesting one.
Were there any duck moats in there? Is what I want to know.
Probably somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
Somebody had to look after the ducks while he was online hosting a meeting. There we go. I think that's sort of covered all of the questions. But if you've got anything, I'm just going to sort of start a general sort of wind up. But if there are any late questions come in, by all means put them up there. We've still got a few minutes left. Just to sort of summarise again, and I'm sure there, over the next weeks and months there will be questions that arise where you need some specific guidance or whatever. The Growth Hub Business Support Helpline is going to be carrying on for a good time yet. That's the 03333 602 300 number, which I think will come up at the end. Just to a bit of shameless promotion. As far as international trade's concerned, the Chamber of Commerce, they've got their import and export with the export documentation and their Chamber Customs Service for anybody who needs help with the practicalities of international trade and so on. If you've got any questions for the speakers today, if you haven't picked up their direct line, by all means contact the helpline, and we'll where necessary we can farm those questions through to the speakers. Hopefully, if you don't mind those. As far as on the last meeting on the international trade question, through the Chamber of Commerce, we are affiliated to the British Chambers of Commerce, and the BCC have a global business network for all their offices around the world, which includes in the EU, and I think it's the office in Belgium, BCC office in Belgium, is acting as a sort of a bit of a hub for fielding particular questions, obviously governing new EU regulations and so on for export, both for export and for import as well. I think from picking up on some of the links, the EU have finally worked out that, or some businesses in the EU have finally worked out that it's just as complicated to export to the UK as it is for people in the UK to export to them. So that was a happy balance. That was a good trade cooperation agreement. Anyway, just for the future, this, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is one in a series of events that the Growth Hub have been promoting. The next one, I think, in the series is on the 16th. I think there's another one. It's all good. How could I forget that? International Women's Day on the 8th. There's networking on the 9th. And then there's also, I think it's an EU transition Ask the Experts event on the 16th of March, I think that is. And that's really where all the guys who've had input in these, or as speakers, in these events, they'll be available to take. I think there's a facility to ask some questions remotely beforehand, and if not, then similar as today, there's a facility to ask questions during the event. So for now, I think we're a couple of minutes short, but we're more or less there. I'd like to thank Tessa and Roddy and Colin for your input today. I think it was very good. Certainly the comments in the chat seem to be that everybody's found it very useful. Thank you very much. Again, thanks to the Chamber crew for supporting an old man who doesn't know which button to press. So thank you very much for doing that part of it. And I think that leaves us. Thank you very much for attending. Look forward to seeing you again, and good luck with the future. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye. That it?
That's it.
Well done. Well done, all. I
Fantastic.
think Roddy's
I think-
already gone.